your brain, your mind, your ego, whatever you want to call it, is acting on your or in your best interest. But it's acting based on outdated tools, outdated information from your childhood, so from your inner child. And you have a choice. Do you want to continue acting from your analytical mind without any input from your heart? Or do you want to allow your heart to have a say in it as well?
Welcome back to another episode on Find Joy with Joyan, the podcast that is all about helping you live and lead a life with joy. I'm your host, Joyan Chan, and every Wednesday we are giving you access to the world's best and brightest minds in their fields on our show. Listen in as these leaders impart their wisdom, inspiration, and stories to empower you to live joyfully with intention, passion, and purpose, and celebrate the struggles and overcome the challenges we may face each day with the tools and insights that we are going to share with you. Whether you are looking to improve your relationship, find your passion, learn how to embrace the present moment, deepen your spiritual connection, or learn the magic of manifestation and law of attraction to attract more abundance, this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. As your host, I am also challenging myself to dig deeper to learn and unlearn and ride along with you. We are not here to tell you how to live your life because it is your life. But this life is all that we have right now. So my friend, why not live our life to the fullest? So I hope these conversations and stories will guide and inspire you to live your life to your highest potential and a life that you are proud of as you continue to grow and evolve in your own journey. So if you are ready to start living a more passionate, purposeful, and joyful life, join us every Wednesday on Find Joy with Joyan for inspirational stories, powerful message, fun conversations, and empowering thoughts with me and my special guests and friends. And now, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Joining us today is a personal and professional development enthusiast with over 15 years of experience in inspiring and empowering individuals to unlock their full potential. At Microsoft, he has a proven track record of year-over-year growth, making him a valuable asset to any team. He's also the host of the Unleash Thyself podcast, where he provides a platform for people from all walks of life to share their stories and experiences. His podcast inspires, empowers, guides, and connects individuals, offering them the support they need to achieve their goals. He's here today to empower you to find purpose and meaning in your work and in your life, and together we can create a positive impact on the world around us. So guys, help me in welcoming my new friend, all the way from originally from Romania, but now living in Canada, the curious, courageous, and inspiring Constantin Morun. This episode is sponsored by Get the Law of Attraction. If you have been listening to this podcast, you will know that I am a big believer of the universe and the law of attraction. Get the Law of Attraction is a spiritual and inspirational company that gives you something really good like chocolate chip cookies to feed your soul and your mind every single day. They provide daily Instagram posts and reels on the universe, gratitude, spirituality for your headache life. They also have an educational course on the Law of Attraction and Gratitude Journal, and their links are in the show note below. Go to their website and use promo code JOYAN, JOYAN, when you sign up to get $25 off.
Thank you, Joanne. It's my pleasure to be here. And like you said, here's to new friendships.
Thank you. Yeah, it is the beginning of something beautiful. And because we were just talking about it, both our journeys off camera earlier before we started the recording. I was also, I went through depression, and this is why I'm so excited to talk to you about your journey as well. But before that, right, let's talk about your background. Can you share with us your experience growing up in communist Romania, one of my favorite countries in Europe, and how did that shape your perspective on the world? And I also want to know what inspired you later to move to Canada?
Yes, Joanne, those are all great questions. My story begins, like you mentioned, in Romania. I was born there. during the communist era, and I grew up with that environment. And what that meant is that it was an environment of scarcity. The mentality was slightly different. There was a lot of fear and everything that comes with fear. And while I was a young boy, I didn't really understand what that meant. But as I grew up, I truly understood the impact society, family, friends, schooling, and everything else around us has on us as individuals. And Romania switched from a communist country to more of a democratic country when I was about 7 or 8 years old. However, it didn't really improve much for many years to come. So when I was about 17, my parents decided to move to Canada to give my brother and I a chance at a better life. Because, of course, coming to North America, you can chase or follow the American dream and you have more opportunities available to you. So I moved to Canada in 2000 and I finished high school here and following in the footsteps of my parents, which is one of those learned behaviors we all grow up with, right? You want to make your parents happy and proud, so you follow in their footsteps. Both of my parents were engineers, so I went to engineering school for a few years, and I realized I didn't necessarily like it that much. So I switched over to what my passion at the time was, which was mathematics and computer science. And I graduated with a degree in mathematics. And then I started working in the computer science and mathematics fields. And I've been on and off in that field for the last 15 plus years. Mixed with that, I had a lot of entrepreneurial adventures. I was a big gamer at one point, so I loved playing games competitively, coaching, mentoring in that regard. Then I had a stint with professional poker where I was playing online, learning a lot. And then as I was learning, I love to share with people. So I coached and mentored hundreds of people, made a lot of content, videos, articles, and whatnot. And then eventually found myself back into the corporate world working as a project manager and consultant. That's where my love for working with people and talking and presenting and listening have all come together. And as my life progressed, so did my love for personal growth. But at the beginning, personal growth for me was, oh, I'm going to read this book or I'm going to listen to this expert and then I'm going to become a much better version of myself. It was always external. And again, that goes back to my upbringing. We, at least in Romania, but I've realized this is true across the world, we grow up listening to family, friends, teachers, the society, and beyond because we don't know much growing up. So we always look up to other people. But what happens in that time is that we allow others to dictate the direction of our life. Because again, we don't challenge that, we don't look inwards, we always look external. And no one is doing this out of ill intent, right? Because your parents want the best for you. Your teachers usually want the best for you. So the idea that someone is malicious in doing this is definitely not something I agree with. However, it doesn't mean that the effects are not long lasting and impacting on one's life. So I'll pause there, Joanne, to see if I answered part of your question, and then we'll continue with my journey in a minute.
Yeah, I love how you just stop yourself and ask me to jump in there if you answer my question. Yes, I want to know. Okay, before we continue the journey, how did you adapt to a new culture and environment at such a young age?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joanne, and it wasn't easy. So, at 17, as you can imagine, I had a lot of friends in Romania, developed a lot of strong friendships. I had my high school sweethearts back in Romania, my grandparents, everyone I grew up with. So, it was very tough. I wasn't really accepting it when we first moved. It wasn't necessarily my choice to move anyway. If I had a choice, I would have not wanted to move. Of course, in hindsight, it was the best move we could have done. But it was tough. However, as tough as it was for me, I can only imagine how tough it was for my parents and the millions and millions of people that have to move by choice or otherwise to new countries. Because we came to Canada speaking very little English, so we had to learn all that. My brother was 12 at the time, so I was 17. And learning a new language, learning a new culture, getting used to colder weather, because we moved in September, right before the cold hit. And like we and I talked off camera, I'm from a place in Romania that's very flat. It doesn't get very cold. So coming to Canada, yeah, that's a bit of a challenge.
It was cold for me though, Timosvara. When
Right.
I was there, it was so cold because it was winter, right? But because I'm
Exactly.
I'm living in Asia, it's like we don't have winter here; it's summer all year long. So that was cold to me, like freezing. Anyway,
Well,
so now,
imagine that and coming to Canada, then
yeah,
you'd have even a bigger
like
shock.
minus, right? Minus degree, right? Oh my god, I
Oh
can't.
yeah, very. I mean, in Celsius, you go down to like -20. I
Mm,
mean, in Fahrenheit as well is similar, but it gets really cold. And when you add the wind, when you add the rain, sometimes rain and snow mix, and of course you add the snow, it gets to be challenging if you're not used to it.
yeah. So okay, let's continue the journey.
Yeah.
How okay, because when I was doing my research, reading about you, you talk about your big awakening. I already talked about that. Your big awakening moment in April, May 2022, which is last year.
Yes.
And then how did your podcast, right, Unleash Thyself, came to you during that dark time? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Joanne. It'll be my pleasure, and it's a great question. So, I want to start prefacing with the fact that I grew up slightly religious, meaning that most of Romania is Christian Orthodox, and I used to go with my parents and my grandparents to church every so often, and of course for the big holidays. But as I grew up, I kind of stepped away from the church. It was never something that I personally wanted to follow or agreed with. And I was agnostic for most of my teens and then early 20s. And it wasn't until I was about 25, 26 when I had my first real, nudge into the spirituality realm. However, at that age, again, I didn't have the network around me, the community around me, nor the knowledge or access to the knowledge. So I parked the spirituality piece in the back of my mind and I continued with my life. Around 35 years old, so that was 10 years later, and that's about 5 years ago now, I something rekindled my desire to really work on myself, and that something was me joining Microsoft. And when you join a company of the size and of that, with the possibility of that impact, you join a team of high performance. So for me to stay at a level where I can compete with everyone and try to be as good as I can, I have to improve myself. And at Microsoft, I was introduced to this concept called growth mindset, which is the idea that as you go through life, as you go through work, of course you're going to make mistakes, of course you're going to fall, but instead of punishing those mistakes and falls, you actually want to learn from them, and it's okay to make mistakes. And that's important to note because that's contrary 100% to how I was raised and how a lot of cultures are these days. If you make a mistake, especially let's say in a communist country, that's seen as weakness, right? It's seen as something that needs to be punished, not celebrated. And I'm not saying we have to celebrate all the mistakes, but everything that we do in life, regardless of what label we put on it, mistake, good, bad, whatever, they are gifts for us to learn from. It's our choice if we want to learn anything from them or not. And for a long time, I was looking on my mistakes as just something I want to avoid and not touch and not think about. So when I joined Microsoft, I started thinking about this idea of growth mindset. And at the beginning, I thought it was, fluff. It was just something that companies do. But then the more I read into it, I read some books, I listened to some podcasts on the topic, the more the idea grew with me. And what I had realized as I was progressing through my personal growth, which was all about consuming content from others, I realized two things. One, that self discovery is crucial. What does self discovery mean to me? It means that, yes, I can look outwards to pick up tools from different experts and people that have been on this journey ahead of me. But really, for me to get any benefit of that, I actually have to come inwards, look for the answers inside, and do the work myself. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, social media these days, the news, they all try to prescribe, these 3 steps or these 10 steps to become successful, lose weight, find love, you fill in the blanks. And it gives people a false hope that there is a magic formula out there. And like the lottery, some people will find the magic formula and will become successful, but that's a very small percentage. So that's self discovery and personal growth. And I was doing a bit of both. And then what I realized was I'm having the American dream. I have an amazing job, amazing family, money, things. I have all of that, but I'm not happy inside. So I realized that I had to find a purpose for myself, my why, like what's driving me. And that was a question that I've actually asked myself most of my life. I remember I was very young when I first asked myself, what's the meaning of life? What's my purpose on this earth? Because to me, it never made sense that we grow up learning lots of things, then get a job, get a spouse, have some kids, and then die. To me, that didn't make sense. So I wanted to understand, okay, what more to life is there? So spirituality came into my life again, working with a couple of people, finding this idea that, wait a second, you can find purpose and meaning in the work you do. You can find something that really truly motivates you, something that comes from your heart as opposed to from everyone around you or from your learned behaviors with your ego, with your mind. So that's kind of how my journey started. Now, to take it to the awakening moment in 2022, I was coming off of a pandemic, like everyone else, right? Where I had to work a lot of hours, and it was all from my home office with very little, in-person human interaction. And I was being burnt out. It was, I guess, the first sign of depression, which I ignored. So I said, you know what? I'll take 3 weeks, and I'll go to this beautiful country which I've never been to before. And in those 3 weeks, I'll visit the country, but also I'll take a 12-day mental health retreat in the mountains of Cuenca, one of the most beautiful towns I've ever seen in the world. And I've traveled a lot. And it was up 10,000 feet in the mountains with lots of vegetation, lots of amazing people. And it was in that moment that I truly awakened or unleashed at least part of myself.
You can't just stop there, right? You're going to tell us what happened.
Of course, of course. I wanted to see if you had any questions on anything I've said so far, but absolutely. So, what's important to note about this retreat is that it offered plant medicine. So, ayahuasca and St. Pedro specifically. Now, I'm someone that while I enjoy a drink here and there, I've never been drunk, nor have I taken drugs, or I'm a fan of drugs. For me, if I take something that's going to alter my state of mind, it has to have a purpose. So when I heard the calling of Mother Ayahuasca, as they say, I decided to make this journey. And the call I heard, or I had it growing in me within for the last 3 or 4 years, since before the pandemic. But of course, the pandemic slowed things down, so I had to postpone my journey. In preparation for this journey, I had studied hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, podcasts, books on the subject. And I was prepared for getting there, which required you to have a specific dieta, but also the journey itself. However, what I wasn't prepared for was coming back or the integration. And we'll talk about that in a second. But what happened in Ecuador? Multiple things happened. I get there on my first day, I start meeting people like myself, professionals, but also people from all walks of life and all ages. I think the youngest was 18, the oldest was like 75. And this was a group of about 30 people. And as I get to meet people, I cannot shake this feeling that I know a lot of these people. Mind you, these people are from all over the world and I've never met them in my life. But deep down in my heart, it felt like I knew them. And maybe people can relate with this, but sometimes, when you walk into a room or you meet someone for the first time, you're like, wow, I know this person from somewhere. Where do I know them from? Anyway, that happened to me with at least 10 plus people from the group of 30 that we met. And as I was getting settled into my retreat, I started to meet more people and the locals and everyone, the shamans and everyone that was there. And this welcoming feeling never left. It felt like I belonged. It felt like people were like-minded. It felt like I could recharge because I was in nature and there were dogs and I love dogs, right? So I spent a lot of time with animals and with myself. But what's also important to note is that with a mathematics background, I'm a very analytical person. So for me, I want to find the logic in everything that happens in life, including things I can't tangibly see or touch. So going to this retreat, I was a skeptic. Honestly, I was a skeptic because, again, I'm like, there's no proof. I can't see it. How can I believe it? However, when I'm saying I was a skeptic with an open mind. And I believe that's what got me this far, is keeping an open mind and allowing whatever happens to then be processed and for me to make a decision instead of having my blinders on and saying, you know what, I don't believe in this. It's witchcraft or whatever. So I'll pause there to see if you have any questions.
What did you do? So you went to this mental health retreat. What kind of, what did you do there? Is it, I heard shaman, did you just sit there, meditate?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you do at these retreats. The beauty of it is that you make out of it what you'd like. There are programs you can follow. So when you arrive, there are, of course, gatherings of people so you can meet everyone. Then there are group meetings where they introduce what will happen at the retreat. You do meditation, yoga, and the plant medicine. They walk you through over the safety concerns around the medicine, how it will work, how the practice is. And over my 12 days there, I did 5 different ceremonies, as they call them, and so you'll be almost every 2.5 days, and they walk you through everything. And the beautiful part is that you have a choice. There were people that chose to only do one ceremony because that's all they needed. There were people that chose to do none, and of course, most people chose to do all of them because they saw the benefit and how it built upon. Now, what's the another beautiful part about being in a community like this is the idea that you spend a lot of time with people that are somewhat like-minded to you. You get to be in a very vulnerable place yourself, but so are others. So you get to connect on a level that I've never experienced in my life. So to give you an example, I now, a year later, have at least 15 or so people from that retreat that I talk to on a regular basis. When I mean regular, it could be weekly or even more. And then from those 15, at least 5 or 6 that I can call really close friends. And these friendships or these connections were made over just 7 days in some cases, or 12 days for those of us that stayed the full duration. And that's something that for me was mind blowing because I'm an independent person. I can be on myself for a long time and be fine. And I didn't realize until that moment the power community has, the power of sitting down, either virtually like you and I are doing right now, or in person with like-minded individuals, being open, sharing what you believe, what your fears are, what your emotions are, and having someone not judge you, having someone just listen to you. And then it's their turn to open up and share some of their deepest, darkest moments in their life. And the connection you form there is, I can't put it into words.
Beautiful, yeah. I personally attended a few programs. I would say, I would call them programs, personal development programs, and yeah, I totally get it. Like when you are there, it's so different because you and all these people are going through something, something together, right? It's like some breakthrough
Yes.
together. It's very different when you're doing this like virtually. It's very different. The energy is very different, right? When you are just like, you can sit here all day long and just with you in your with yourself in a room, right, in front of a laptop. But it's so different when you're in a room full of people who are going through the similar journey, going for the same breakthrough, right? So yeah, it's mind blowing. If my listeners they have not done any retreat or programs before, I highly encourage them to do one as early as you can, right? Start this journey as early as you can. I didn't start my until I was like mid 20s. So I want to go back
Mhm.
to that moment. So what was the awakening? How would you describe your awakening?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think there were multiple parts to that awakening. So the first day there was no medicine. I was fully sober, right? No, nothing was in my system. And I started feeling different than I normally do. I started feeling energies of people. I started feeling emotions on a level that I've never felt before. And as I mentioned, the connections as well. So my analytical brain was already trying to figure out what's going on because this is something that we're not used to, something that we haven't experienced in the past. And as the first day progressed and it got better and better, the first ceremony was the second day. And by the time I got to the ceremony, I was so excited to see what could happen next. And I would say the first awakening moment was when I connected with one of the shamans. So these are traditional shamans that have studied the ways of their tribes in the Amazon jungle. And they're not just plant medicine shamans, they are shamans that do a lot of ceremonies. And they're all about essentially unleashing the best version of whoever is inside of you. So I had this session with the shaman. We all did. It was about half an hour. They called it a limpia or a cleansing session. And walking into the room with this person, he asked me, "Why am I here? What's my purpose for the visit?" And I had three reasons why I went down, which not necessarily relevant. But I only was sharing one reason with people and with the shamans because at the time I was very afraid of people judging me, of not fitting in. Those are very old ways of thinking that I had from growing up, always wanting to be accepted, right, to be part of a group. And then the shaman looks at me and says, "Okay, so you told me this reason, but you haven't told me the other two." And I'm like, how does he even know? This was not put on paper. This was honestly, I was the only one that knew all of that. So that took me back. That was within the first minute. And then we went through the cleansing. He did some energy work, which I didn't really understand at the time. So that opened my mind up again because I'm like, I could feel my analytical side of my brain was fighting my spiritual side. Because it's like, on one side, I'm like, this is so cool. On the other side, I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. And that kind of continued throughout my plant medicine because I kept having aha moments over aha moments over aha moments, and it kept opening me up. But the true awakening moments didn't happen until after I came back, integrated, so applied everything I've learned, suffered, like you mentioned earlier as well, with depression a bit. And by a bit, I mean for like 7 months. And then after that, I finally sat down and I realized, wow, okay, all of that, how no matter how tough it was, I'm so grateful for because it allowed me to sit with my emotion. It allowed me to go deep down to things that I buried many years ago, allow them to surface up, heal them, and then progress to a next stage. So that's kind of the full version, or not the full version, but the 10,000-foot version of how I got to what I am today. But an earlier question you had was the podcast, the mission, the why, all that stuff. Well, what's important to note is that one of my reasons for going down to the Amazon jungle and to this retreat was to find a bit more about my purpose in life. And I didn't necessarily find anything that directly spoke to that while I was there, with the exception of one crucial element, which was the idea that everyone's purpose in this life, according to the shamans I spoke with, was to find love and share that love with everyone around. And to me, that didn't make sense at the time until I sat with it and I realized that what they meant, at least in my mind, was the idea that the answer for everything is love, being kind, and everything that comes with love, compassion, empathy, and everything else. But then each of us can take that and do whatever we want with it. So in your case, Joanne, you do this podcast because you want to share your love with everyone else. In my case, very similar right now. I help people through my podcast and through conversations to unleash their best version while I'm doing the same thing for myself because I'm learning as much as most people I talk to or listen to our conversations. So I would say that was the biggest eye-opening element. And then it came to me returning home. And I came home a person changed on the inside because I saw so many beautiful things. I saw the value of community, the value of love, the value of water and food, which in the Western world and many parts of the world we take for granted, right? I saw all these beautiful things and I was riding a high for the first couple of weeks. But then, unfortunately, as no one else around me changed, and why would they? My work didn't change, my partner, my family, no one did. The reality sank in of now I have a vision of how the world should be according to everything I've seen and experienced, but it's not. So that's what sent me on my depressive state, combined with, let's say, a more challenging time at work where there were a lot of changes happening with my role and my team. Everything kind of piled up and I went in a depressive state. So what happened with me was I closed in. I didn't allow friends to reach in, nor was I reaching out. I was putting my time into things that provided little value in the long term, but maybe a bit of relief in the short term, like computer games, for example, or watching Netflix for hours. And it wasn't, again, until like about 7 or 8 months later that I realized, or I pulled myself out of it and realized everything that had happened. And while it was negative for those 7 months by all descriptions, there were also so many positives. And one of them was this idea of the podcast and my why or my reason for being here. And that happened around August 2022. And I was driving with a really good friend of mine, and she shared with me about this amazing alternative or holistic healer that has been able over a 25-year career to help hundreds of people cure things like depression, anxiety, even cancer or fibromyalgia. And that piqued my interest. And I remember being very judgmental in the spot and saying, you tell me that someone that has these gifts and these skills has only helped hundreds of people over such a long career. How can we get his message and the message of all people that are similar to him and everyone that has a gift? And guess what? We all have a gift. We're all talented. We all have something to give back. And how can we create a platform where they can share these beautiful messages with the world? And that's when the first idea of the podcast came. And this was August of 2022.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. It's so beautiful how the idea came to you because you want to give people a platform to share their stories. I was a little selfish back then when I started my podcast. Not that I didn't want to give people a platform to share, but it was more to, it's more like a platform for me to share my voice, to share my story. And it was selfish also because I wanted to interview people and just learn from them, right? It's like to help me grow, right? So to enhance my own journey. But now it's a platform for people to share, just like you. And share with us more about the podcast. If people were to listen to your podcast, what would they expect?
Yes, Jen, that's a great question. So first, let me touch a bit on the selfish part because that's something that I used to think a lot as well. Oh, I'm selfish in doing this and I'm selfish in doing that. But what I've realized more recently, and I'm curious to see your take as well, is the idea that by being selfish, we get to improve ourselves so then we can show up as a better version to everyone around us. So by you being selfish and starting the podcast, you've learned so much from people that now you can give back more.
Mhm.
Now you can bring people on the show that can give back more. So yes, it may have started as a quote unquote selfish act, but it allows you to do so much more with it. And that's what I've realized with my life because I was always fighting with this idea, ooh, I don't want to do this for myself because it's selfish. But then in retrospect, if I do something for myself, let's say like this mental health retreat, now a year later, I'm like, wow, look at all those benefits. And the reason I say selfish is because I left my partner behind, I left my dogs behind for 3 weeks, right? My friends, I spent money on myself only, right? So that's really a selfish act if you think about it. However, I think we have to look beyond the initial act and say, okay, how is this going to benefit me? And then not just me, of course, everyone around me. And all of a sudden, that selfish act is no longer selfish.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And thank you so much for sharing that because we can't give what we don't have, right? Again, you have to be selfish, right? You have to love yourself. You have to put yourself first because if you don't put yourself first, if you don't care for yourself, you can never love someone else. You can never care for another. You can't give what you don't have, basically, right? You can't pour from a empty cup. So I love this Oprah Winfrey. She always said this, like, you have to fill up yourself like until you are so full, until you are overflowing, then you can give to others. And I just love how she said that. It's like, yeah, mind blowing.
Exactly. So I love what you said there, Joanne. And I believe that there are so many words in the English language and, of course, in other languages as well that have a negative connotation. And it's just because of how society or others are framing it or are only showing that aspect of it. So, for example, when you say selfish, even my mind right away goes to something negative. Ooh, Joanne is selfish. But really, like we were just talking, in selfishness, there's so much beauty because like you said, we have to do things for ourselves to be able to do things for others. And many people, including myself, were at least thinking the other way at some points in our life. I always wanted to give to people, but I wasn't taking time to give anything to myself and grow myself.
Yeah, yeah. And before I ask the next question, I want to go back to what you said earlier about integration, right? So you came back from this retreat and then you went to a depressive state, right? And then 7 months later, you start to apply what you learned. And I want to know what did you do? Like exactly what did you do to apply to integrate all the knowledge, all the lessons, all the wisdom that you have learned from that retreat to finally make it work for you and to change your life.
Yeah, that's a great question, Joanne. So first off, I would say I'm still learning, still things that I've seen there haven't necessarily fully processed. That I may not be at an energetic level or vibrational level to fully understand them. But what happened as the months were progressing, and sitting with myself, sitting with those emotions coming up, I started challenging old beliefs. And it was hard at first because, like any change we make in our life, it's always hard to do anything. But like I like to say, awareness is half the battle. So if you're aware that something is not right and something could be better, and potentially you're aware of the opportunities that lie beyond what you're doing currently, then you can start implementing certain things. So while 7 months, it took me 7 or 8 months to come out of my depression, I was applying or learning things over those 7 or 8 months. And it all culminated with me wanting to have more opportunities to learn and have a bigger impact on the world. And it was at the same time when I was finding out my why. So there was this book by Simon Sinek, you may know of him, Find Your Why, that I read about 5 or 6 years ago. And I always struggled with the idea, okay, so what's my why? What motivates me? What gets me excited to get up in the morning? And that process took quite a bit of time because there were so many fake layers to what my why could be that I had to kind of unpack all of them and get to the bottom of it. And my why right now, or my purpose or my mission, which is very similar to what I'm trying to bring to the podcast, is the idea of being in service of others, inspiring and empowering people on their life and awakening journeys. And that's kind of the short version of it. And it's the same idea for the podcast, like you mentioned in the introduction. It's the idea of bringing amazing people from all walks of life, and everyone has an amazing story. It's not just those that have written a book or have accomplished something in life. And giving them a platform to share their story so that others can find a connection, find an inspiration, find some empowerment, maybe find a tool, some guidance, whatever they could pull out of it. The lessons themselves, to go back to that question, start small. And there were lessons that at times were going above my head, meaning that I had my blinders on, so I couldn't really see them. But some of the big lessons were around love. So love for myself, love for my partner, love for my community, for everyone else. And again, when I say love, I'm talking about everything that comes with love: empathy, compassion, being nicer to people, all those elements. And as I was going through those motions, it actually made me a better coworker as well at Microsoft in my professional life, because all of a sudden I was bringing more of my authentic self. I was being more empathic with people. So if you were my customer and I would deal with you, I would have a different view of you as a person now. So it would allow for better connections, better relationships, and better outcomes for everyone.
I like how you just mentioned about Microsoft, because I want to know, because now you are still in that company, you still have a 9 to 5 job, right? And now your purpose, your life missions is to empower and inspire people. So how are you gonna navigate following your heart and honoring your mission while still working in a 9 to 5 in the busy world of tech, like a giant company like Microsoft? How are you gonna navigate that going forward?
That's such an amazing question, Joanne. So the way I plan on navigating my professional life is that I want to bring more of myself in that environment. And what I love about working on Microsoft, among many things, is the fact that we are empowered to be our true self and to bring positivity into the world that we create there and be our authentic self. So for me, I love the job even more than I ever did before because I don't necessarily have to hide anymore who I am. I am this joyful person. I have these experiences, these knowledges. I can bring them to the table. And now I can give back. And let me tell you something that I realized way too late in my life. We all give off energies, right? We have our own energy and then people can feel them. So if you're sad, if you're, let's say, in a state of mind that's not necessarily present, like let's say we're doing this conversation now, even virtually, you could feel that. And people would be more closed off and less likely to talk. But if you come with more energy, if you come with more love in your heart, all of a sudden the type of conversations you have, the type of impact you can have on people is tremendous. And keep something in mind, which is again a big aha moment for me. When I'm being nice to someone, I'm doing it out of my heart. That person may not have had anyone else be nice to them or ask them how they truly are, or have a conversation with anyone like that for maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe a month. So think of it as you may be the only person to do or say something nice to someone, be it in a professional life, personal life, or otherwise. So that's how I'm trying to bring that into my professional life. And even though it's not, like you said, 100% following my mission, I can find purpose and meaning that work. Because at the end of the day, what I'm doing with the customers I work with, it's impacting how someone, an employee at that organization, does things on a day-to-day basis. So if I can make someone's day easier because now they have the tools they need to be successful, so they can now take 10 minutes more in the morning to spend with their kids, or leave, let's say, 10 minutes early to spend time with their kids, or they can work from home better. I mean, that's a beautiful mission in itself, because you're impacting people through the work you do. So that's what I encourage people to find a purpose, joy, and love in what you do. And then you don't necessarily have to work a day in your life, because you're enjoying everything you're doing. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have something else in your heart that you want to follow, that you shouldn't follow that. Of course, my goal down the line, right, as I progress with my podcasting and my mission of inspiring and empowering people, I can see a direction in which I become a full-time content creator, podcaster, a person that's going to speak in front of crowds, call it motivational speaking, whatever you want to call it, and be someone that gives back even more, right? But in this moment in time, I think we can have a nice balance where we can do both professional and personal projects and do them with so much love that you don't feel tired. And that's the stage I'm at right now. I enjoy doing that, and I enjoy doing this.
That is like, wow, like that is the best advice that I have ever heard. Because I was just about to ask, like, how do you help people to find meaning in their work if they don't like their work so much right now? If they hate the company, they hate the job they are doing right now, right? How do you help them find the meaning and love and all that? And you just answered that question like so beautifully without me even asking. And okay, so I can see you like speaking on stages, making a big impact in the world. I can see that for you, and I know it's gonna happen because you have such a beautiful message, you're such a beautiful soul, and beautiful heart, and the love that is coming out from you, even just through the screen, I can feel it. Like you said, energies, right? It's contagious, and we can feel it even through the screen. So I'm so happy that we are connected now, and I can't wait to see what is going to happen for you in the future, in the near future, your podcast, your growth. Just amazing. Maybe you can even start giving talks at Microsoft, right? It's a best place to start with.
Can you imagine spirituality in the workplace? And that's something that I was scared to show or talk about in my professional life. And I realized, you know what, spirituality means so many things to so many people. And the best part is spirituality is something that you don't need to push on anyone, and nothing should be pushed on anyone anyway. But what I believe spirituality is going to be different from you and different from someone else, and that's fine. That's the beauty in it, is what you make of it. And once we understand that, at least to my knowledge, the idea that we are spiritual beings first, having a human experience by choice, then everything changes. So that means I'm here on earth by choice. So let's make the most of my time here. And that's what I hope to get other people to see and empower them to release that version of themselves that's hidden deep down, that they know in their heart, to the world.
Okay, what is the first step to unleashing ourselves?
I think the first step is awareness. So funny thing I should mention is that in my professional life, one of the areas I specialized in is called organizational change management. Is this idea that if, let's say, Joanne, you had an organization, a large one, and you wanted to change from using Zencastr like we're using today to using Squadcast as an example. Well, there are steps in there that we need to take where we want to make the change as easy and as seamless for the end user. So for anyone using Zencastr right now, to make it easy for them to use Squadcast, or anyone using Zoom to using Microsoft Teams. And in the professional world, a lot of this change management revolves around 5 pillars, which I've only realized later in life that they resonate so well with our personal lives. And the first pillar is awareness for the change. So let me give you an example in my case. I've always challenged myself and asked, what's my purpose? What's my why? And then the universe, God, higher self, provided hints along the way. But I never really stopped to look at them until later in life, where I became aware of what more I could be doing through conversations with other people, to listening to podcasts like this, to reading or listening to audiobooks. And it was all about awareness, because if I have my blinders on and I only know what I've learned from school, from growing up in a certain place, then it's very hard to be accepting of anything that's in our peripheral vision or behind us. So again, awareness is the first step. Then comes the desire to change. So I'm aware that I'm not happy in my current spot. Now I have a choice. Do I want to change, or do I want to stay in the same spot and then blame other people or even myself in some cases about what's not changing? And then once you have awareness and desire, then it's all about, okay, so do I have the knowledge? And the beautiful part is that most of us have the knowledge. We're listening to this podcast right now, we're reading, we're listening to others talk, and a lot of that knowledge is within us. So now we have to spend some time to look inwards. And when I say look inwards, I know it sounds fancy, but it's actually very simple. It's put the device down, sit in meditation. Doesn't have to be anything special before you go to bed or when you wake up. For me, what it was just taking my dogs for a walk in the park, but leaving my cell phone behind. So that meant that I could be present and I could see that my two dogs, they didn't care about what happened 2 hours before or what they may have for dinner or what they may be doing after the walk. They were so in the moment. And that was such a huge lesson for me because it reminded me of, okay, I can be in the moment. I can draw inspiration from the nature around me. I can connect with Mother Earth. I can connect with my higher self, with God, with spirit, whatever you believe in. And that means sitting with me. And all of a sudden, ideas come up, right? There are some tougher ideas or thoughts that come up because you've suppressed them so long. So that's that doing the work. And then there's the idea of building that knowledge, right? Because as you start, there's no closing the floodgates. You have to keep building and building. And guess what? It becomes very seamless. I cannot see a scenario in which I'm done learning. And in every conversation I have, like you and I are having right now, where I'm interviewing a guest on my show, or I'm working at Microsoft, I'm learning all the time. It's just about opening up your mind and seeing every experience that you co-create in this universe, you can learn from.
I totally agree. Personal development is a journey. It's not a destination where you get to that you are all done changing and now you're perfect. No, right? Yeah, no, I wish we can all get there like sooner or later, but no, it's a journey. When you get there, there's always a next level. There's always more things to learn, more beliefs to change, right? And so, yeah, I love how you think about that. It's all about having a growth mindset, like you said in the beginning, right? It's all about having a growth mindset that we are always growing, that we are always being challenged. And how do you see it? It's all your mindset and your perspective. And now, I think you will be the best person to ask this question. Can you share with my listeners the three biggest and most important life lessons that you have learned in your own journey that will help people to become a better version of themselves today?
Awesome. Yeah, I think I have those three. Fun enough that these three have come to me in meditation in the last couple of months. I knew them before, I just didn't necessarily pay attention enough to them. So the number one is that the answer is love. Meaning that if someone does something, it doesn't matter what they do, you can always choose how you answer. So answering with love, regardless of what happens in your life, we only bring more positivity into your life. Because if, let's say, Joanne, you're mean to me, maybe we're driving down the road, you honk at me, now I honk back at you, we both get in a pissy mood, maybe even get into an altercation at some point. But if I respond from a place of like, you know what, maybe he doesn't have a good day today, maybe someone close into his life is not doing well, maybe he got let go from the job, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, we don't know, but we have a choice of how we respond in that moment. And there was such a big aha moment for me because I was someone that, again, based on my learned behaviors, I would be very quick to respond, and not necessarily with love. I would respond with fear, which is the opposite of love and everything that comes with fear, right? Anger, impulsiveness, and all that stuff. So I would say the first lesson that I learned later in life that I wish I would have learned earlier is that the answer is love. And the challenge I would have for the listeners is to find a scenario in your life where you could sprinkle a bit more love and just watch it. You don't have to change much, just one scenario, be it in a professional life, be it in your personal life, and see the effects of that. The effects on the other people, but more importantly, the effects it has on you, on your peace of mind. The second one I would talk about is this idea that it just is. So let me explain. we're watching a nature TV show. So, Joyan, you have one show on, I have a different show on. But it's the same story told from a different perspective. The show you're watching shows a family of rabbits or bunnies enjoying some grass, in picture it with a mountain in the backdrop, beautiful. Then, as the story progresses, you see a fox come in, take one of the bunnies, kills it, and that's it, walks away. Well, in that story that you just watched, the fox is the evil character, the bunnies are the good characters for most people. Now, I'm watching the same story but from a different perspective. Now, my story begins with the fox and the babies and the puppies that she has that are just a few weeks old, maybe a few months old, and she needs to bring food to them so they don't starve. So he shows us everything that the fox is doing for the babies and everything that comes with that. Now, a few minutes later, he shows us her going out to find food. And of course, foxes are carnivores, so they have to find the bunny or whatever other rodents to bring food back. So she finds the bunny, kills it, brings it back, and feeds the babies. All of a sudden, she's no longer the evil character. She's this magnificent, amazing mother that fed her babies. So what the story told me is that everything in life, everything that happens to us or for us, or that we see in the world, maybe we apply labels to it. Maybe we apply, when I say label, good, bad, ugly, beautiful. It's because of everything that we've learned and everything that society has groomed us to see. So nothing really is good or bad in my mind anymore. They just are. They're things, they're experiences. But we, with our preconceived ideas, we put labels on them.
I love that story. I'm having goosebumps right now. Yeah, at first because I love rabbits, so when you mentioned about bunny, I was like, then you got killed. I was like, oh, okay. Then you told the story, the morale of the story. I was like, okay, that makes sense now. Anyway, the lessons.
Yeah, so the third one, which again I've realized I wouldn't say way too late in life because there is such thing as it's never too late. Like we are all on this journey at different stages. We all go through life through different experiences to come out a better version of ourselves. And it's up to us to take on those lessons and make the choices to bring us to this stage. But this lesson has to do with love again. And the idea that true love, is unconditional. And the way this came to me was when I was doing a lot of inner work and I realized that there were parts of me I didn't like. There were parts of me I was keeping buried down and really disliked or hated. So how could I claim that I love myself if I don't actually love all the parts of me? And then we can expand. Let's look at your partners. How can you claim to love your partner, but as soon as they do something you don't like, you don't love them anymore? Look at your family. Look at anything else you love in life. And I'm like, wow, when that came to me, I'm like, whew, that's deep. And it's not something that's revolutionary in the sense that a lot of people talk about this. But until you sit with it and think about it, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm a very logical person. So if something doesn't make sense logically to me, I keep challenging it until I find the logic in it, either for or against it.
That is the most three beautiful lessons. And you know what amazed me the most, that you didn't even see this coming. You didn't even know that I was going to ask this question, and you already have three lessons in that is ready to go. I was like, I'm so amazed. This has been a very life changing conversation. And before we move on, is there anything that you really want to share or really want to talk about? Perhaps I didn't ask you or didn't let you.
That's well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so and for everything you said so far, Joanne. I would add one thing. You touched on this a bit, and I haven't necessarily talked enough about, is the idea of following your heart. And that's what I've been doing for the last little while, and it's always evolving. But what I would challenge the listeners to think about is your brain, your mind, your ego, whatever you want to call it, is acting on your or in your best interest. But it's acting based on outdated tools, outdated information from your childhood, so from your inner child. And you have a choice. Do you want to continue acting from your analytical mind without any input from your heart? Or do you want to allow your heart to have a say in it as well? And this idea of following your heart means first understanding who you are to be able to unleash thyself, to be able to release that best version of yourself. Because as you become aware that you want to change, understand who you are, develop the desire, develop that knowledge, you can now become a much better version of yourself. And ideally, you would want to have a goal, but don't set expectations around the goal. Because as soon as you set expectations around a goal or a target, you're putting blinders back on and you're going to miss out on opportunities and abilities to interact with people, to allow experiences to come into your life. So again, the idea is follow your heart, find the purpose and meaning in whatever it is that you do. It doesn't matter how simple or complicated the task you're doing might be. Think about the impact it has on those around you. And even if it doesn't have a huge impact, you can make a big impact by being a better version of yourself, by bringing more joy into the world, more happiness. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a barista at Starbucks. You may argue that, I'm just a server. What am I doing here? But imagine people come to you before going to the stressful jobs, just smiling at someone, right? Just telling them, "Oh, I love your outfit today," or "I love your hair," or something genuine about the person can make a huge difference. And again, it could be that you're the only one that says something nice to that person for the day, week, month, or even year. So think about that. It doesn't matter what job you do, you can be a better person to those around you, which means you're going to become a better person to yourself.
That is beautiful. Yes. And I was just add on to that saying, just be grateful that you have a job. Right? If you don't like your job, be grateful that you have a job. So many people are jobless today. They are living on the street, they don't have income, right? They are struggling, right, financially. And you have a job. First, be grateful for that. And second, yes, just change how you show up at your job, right? Like you said, Starbucks. I love Starbucks, right? I love going to Starbucks. So many people love Starbucks. Yes, if you are lucky enough to work at Starbucks, you're the luckiest person in the world, right? It's an amazing company.
Two quick things here, because you touched on both of them, and I would love to expand really quick. First of all, this is simple, is if you look at psychology and if you look at what the professionals are saying, it turns out that human beings like you and I, down the line, down the years, we don't necessarily remember what you said, Joanne, or what you did. We remember how you made us feel. So when I go into a Starbucks, even years later, I remember that one barista that made me feel like $1,000,000, that made me feel seen, that made me smile. So think about that when you interact with people, is how do you make someone feel? Because that's how you're going to be remembered. Do you want to make them feel good or bad? And again, good or bad is very relative. You decide what it is for you. And the second part that you touched on is gratitude. And I'm happy you brought it up, is because that's a practice I was foreign to in the past. And even though I heard about it, I wasn't doing anything with it. But it's a practice I've started doing both at night before I go to bed and in the morning. And it's had a major impact on my life, because no matter how bad a day is, and I've had many during my depressive state and beyond, and before as well, like most of us do, you can always find positive spin to it. So you can be grateful. In my case, I can be grateful for my puppies, for my partner. I could be grateful for the pillow I'm sleeping on, or the bed, or like you said, the fact that I have a job, or any of the other million things that we take for granted, like, for example, water. That was a big one for me. I didn't realize how much I was taking water for granted. And meanwhile, there's billions of people affected by poor water quality or no water at all, or they have to spend good portions of their day to find water or food or any of the other things that we take for granted.
Totally. Yeah, they have these children. I saw some videos before. They have to travel to somewhere far just to get water and bring it back to their home. And I was like, I can just go downstairs and just, easily accessible, right? What do we take for granted? Even the air that we are breathing, even the Wi-Fi that we are having, everything around us, right? We take for granted. It's only when you change your perspective, think about how other people are not that lucky to be born in a city, to have what you have now, to have a roof, to have a shelter. It just really changes everything. It changes how you feel, right? If you are depressed, I would feel like you will feel better about yourself.
Exactly. And that's one we haven't talked about, but that's something for a different time, is what I wish I would have done when I was depressed to come out of it faster. And that's a big part of it. Looking at the positive side, trying to be grateful for the things you do have versus the things you don't have, and allowing people in, right? Allowing people in to your life and reaching out. Give a friend a chance to help you out. Because if you're feeling stuck, someone may be able to help you. Or maybe not, but at least they can listen to you. They can guide you in the to the next step possibly. Or you can guide yourself by just expressing how you're feeling.
Yeah. I feel like there are so many things we can talk about. We can talk about everything almost, right? And this is not, you're gonna come back. I will have you back on the show to talk about everything else. And this has really been a transformational conversation, and just want to thank you for coming here, and thank you so much for taking your time out. You have been very generous with your time and kind with your time today. But we always end our show with final 5 rapid fire questions. Surprise!
That's right.
Every question has to be answered in 1 word or 1 sentence maximum. Okay? Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
The first question is, what is one thing you wish you knew earlier?
The answer is love.
Love it. Second question, if you could live your life all over again, what would you do differently?
I would do everything the same. It brought me to where I am today.
Beautiful. That is almost the same answer that I get from all the guests. Every time they say, I will change nothing. Yeah, this amazed me, The third question is, what is something you're trying to learn or curious about right now?
Everything. Energy, spirituality, personal development. Yeah, everything.
If there is one specific topic, like really specific.
Great question. I would say how to help others find purpose and meaning in their life on a deeper level than just we talked about.
Beautiful. Yeah, love that. The next question is, if you have 5 minutes and the whole world was listening to you, what would you say?
We will go back to those 3 lessons that we talked about, and I'll sprinkle in the idea of gratitude that we spoke about, and challenging people to do something with either of those 3 things in their life, something small, to see the value they could get out of it.
Beautiful. Yes, you have to share the 3 lessons. The last question is, what brings you joy?
A lot of things today. I would say the most is being in service to others and to myself.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you so much again. Now tell my listeners where they can find you online or connect with you or listen to your podcast.
Yes. Thank you, Joyan. So my podcast called Unleash Thyself, you can find it on YouTube. We'll have audio and video, and you can find it on any of the major podcasting platforms. It goes live on May 17, and it will be posting twice a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays with the occasional bonus episode. You can find us, or you can find more information on our website at unleashthyself.com, which will be live by the time you hear this. And of course, you can find us on all the major social media platforms. If you want to connect with me specifically, go to LinkedIn, type in Constantin without a E at the end, Bo, which is my first name or my nickname, and Morun, which is my last name, and you'll find me there. Always happy to connect with like-minded individuals. Send me a note. Happy to chat. And thank you so much, Joanne. It's been such a pleasure, and you're an amazing host. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And all right, guys, I know you love this episode. If not, you wouldn't be listening all the way until the end, right? Remember to take a screenshot of this episode if you're listening, and tag me and Constantin on Instagram so we can connect with you personally and we can reshare your posts, right? Our Instagram handle is @podcast, and we will put all the links in the show notes below, so make sure you click on the links and follow us if you haven't already, and show some love to Constantin. Listen to his podcast, Unleash Thyself, coming on May 17th. And make sure you hit the subscribe button as well so you don't miss another episode coming every Wednesday. And I will always leave you the same way as I leave you every other episode. Show up. The world needs you and you need you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Thank you again for tuning to Find Joy with Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can help support this podcast in one of 3 ways. 1. Take a screenshot of this episode and share it on your IG story and tag me at findjoyjoyan_podcast so I can repost and connect with you. 2. Share this podcast with a friend or a family member. And 3, leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to grow and reach more listeners worldwide. Make sure you also subscribe so you don't miss out on any episode coming Wednesday. Thanks for being here, and I will see you soon in the next episode.